While other people awaken superpowers and become friends with loyal dogs and singing birds, I ended up with what might be the smelliest superpower in the entire solar system, the ability to communicate with rats, flies, and cockroaches, the ultimate sewer intelligence network. Ironically, it's precisely because humans ignore and look down on these tiny creatures hiding in drains and dark corners that I've been able to stay one step ahead of the police whenever my little rat informants accidentally witness a crime scene. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to QuickBuzzBig. Your support is the biggest motivation for us to keep bringing you new videos every single day. Thanks for watching. Please continue listening to the story. I would show up at a crime scene, look around for a few minutes, and somehow uncover a clue. To them, I was just a lucky amateur who had stumbled onto the answer by pure chance. Keeping a calm expression, I declared plainly. Sensing the lingering resentment at a crime scene, following the traces left behind by the butcher, and locating where he hid the murder weapon, that is my method of solving cases. Lam Fong looked at me as if I were some strange creature. Deep down, he couldn't help admiring my audacity. I could spout all those mystical theories so smoothly, naturally, and confidently that they almost sounded convincing. With that kind of composure, people might actually believe I possessed supernatural powers. Apparently influenced by my confidence, Lam Fong found himself asking. "Then is there anything you need me to help with?" I waved my hand. "No need. Just go wait in the car. I need some quiet time alone." Lam Fong glanced around the road. Every now and then, a vehicle passed by, and in the distance stood a construction site that was still under development. Seeing that the area seemed reasonably safe, he nodded immediately. After all, he had brought along a stack of case files and planned to continue reviewing them in the car. That was much better than trailing behind me while I carried out these strange little rituals. But before getting back into the vehicle, Lam Fong still remembered his responsibility and called out. "Stay near the main road, all right? Don't wander off too far. If anything happens, call me immediately. Don't do anything reckless on your own." I raised my hand and gave him a firm okay sign. Neither of us particularly liked the other, so staying out of each other's way during the investigation was the perfect unspoken arrangement. I slipped behind a large tree, making sure I was hidden in the car's blind spot. Then I quickly opened the container and released the 3 sewer rats and Lang 107. Spread out and search the area. See if there are any rat gangs or groups of cockroaches around here. Especially any old-timers who might know something about the guy who dumped a body in this flower bed last year. I need their testimony. After a moment's thought, I tore open a packet of cookies, broke them into smaller pieces, and handed them out. Take these as gifts. A little bribery makes people much easier to talk to. At home, these little sewer operatives were loudmouth troublemakers. But when it came to carrying out assignments, they were surprisingly reliable. The 3 rats each grabbed a piece of cookie and darted into the bushes, disappearing in the blink of an eye. Only Lang 107 was noticeably slower. Hugging his cookie tightly, he dragged his plump body toward the edge of the flower bed. Just then, a young man riding a bicycle happened to pass by. The moment he spotted Lang 107, he shouted, "Ah! What a gigantic cockroach!" He slammed on the brakes and raised his heel, clearly preparing to deliver a crushing stomp. Startled, I rushed forward and shouted, "Stop!" The young man, who looked about 18 or 20 years old, stared at me as if I were an alien. "Why are you stopping me? It's a cockroach. Let me send it off to its next life." Out of the corner of my eye, I saw that Lang 107 had already scurried away at top speed. Only then did I breathe a sigh of relief and put on my most innocent expression. "Oh, sorry. My mistake. I thought you were about to step on an ant." The young man looked at me as if questioning reality itself. "That cockroach was the size of a thumb, and you're calling it an ant?" I blinked. I'm severely nearsighted. The young man was left speechless. He shot me a look as though I belonged to another planet, then pedaled away without another word. Only after he disappeared into the distance did I finally let out a relieved breath. The horrifying memory of the fly informant that True Vu had smashed flat against a wall still haunted me. I truly had no desire to witness another scene of goo spilling out and body parts flying everywhere involving my little partners. At first, I was only worried that we wouldn't be able to dig up any useful clues. Now, I had started worrying about the safety of Big Rat, Gray Rat, Black Rat, and Lang 107 instead. Thank goodness. About 15 to 20 minutes later, the 3 rats finally came trotting back. Lang 107 was riding safely on one of their backs. More importantly, they had brought along a local sewer rat, a medium-sized one with light gray fur and a completely unfamiliar face. As expected, Lang 107's report was disappointing. The cockroaches from the nearby construction site were scared stiff. They only dared to move around in the dark and never ventured onto the road for fear of being stepped on. According to them, the older generations had vaguely mentioned that someone had once disposed of a body near this flower bed, but whether it had been a whole body or half a body, male or female, they had no idea. I didn't blame them. Instead, I crushed up a few more cookie crumbs as a reward for Lang 107's hard work. Still, anxiety was beginning to creep into my heart. That was why, when I saw the 3 rats return with an actual local witness, I was overjoyed. I immediately questioned it about the body disposal case. Big Rat, however, slipped back into his gangster act and raised a paw to stop me. Hold it. Let us grab a bite first. This territory is dangerous. You have no idea what we've been through just to get back here. Curious, I asked what had happened. Big Rat put on a mysterious, unfathomable expression and refused to elaborate. Gray Rat, on the other hand, couldn't keep his mouth shut. The rat gangs around here are jerks, sis. When they saw us working for a human, they thought we were spies and jumped us. But how could they possibly beat Big Rat's martial arts? We gave them a good beating. Then, after we sweetened the deal with those cookies, they finally agreed to hand over this witness for us to bring back. That's not even the whole story. Gray Rat continued excitedly. On the way back, we ran into a stray cat boss. Luckily, Big Rat bravely volunteered as bait and lured the cat away in another direction. That's how he saved all of us. Big Rat lifted his chin and snorted. Why bring up such trivial matters? It's all in the past now. I couldn't help laughing. His arrogant, overbearing tone was ridiculous, yet somehow, strangely heroic. Touched by his so-called self-sacrifice, I immediately pulled out a premium strip of beef jerky. I broke it in half, respectfully offering one piece to Big Rat and the other to the unfamiliar witness rat. For now, I decided to call him Koite. Koite, go ahead and eat. It's delicious. Then I scraped together the remaining cookie crumbs and divided them between Gray Rat and Black Rat. I didn't bring much with me, so just make do for now. Next time we head back, I'll treat you to a proper feast. Gray Rat eagerly accepted the crumbs and crunched away. It's fine, sis. Any cookies you buy are delicious. We love them. Black Rat nodded in agreement while chewing. Only Big Rat shot his 2 subordinates an irritated look, as if calling them a pair of useless gluttons. Deep down, however, he seemed rather pleased that he had received special treatment. He turned toward the witness rat and barked. Hey, you. Didn't you say you saw the guy who buried, no, the guy who dumped the body in this flower bed? Stop stuffing your face and start talking. Koite, the construction site rat, was just an ordinary working rat who had spent his entire life in this area. Chances were he had never tasted beef jerky this good before. Startled by the sudden shout, he nearly jumped out of his fur. Although they were both rats, Big Rat's presence was overwhelmingly intimidating. Frightened, Koite shrank back and hurriedly blurted everything out. Why yes. I know. I've already told this story several times. I saw it with my own eyes. There was a man dressed in black, digging a hole in the flower bed. Then he stuck half of a woman's body into it. I immediately perked up and pressed for details. What kind of black clothing? A dress shirt or a t-shirt? slacks or something else? Be specific. And what did his face look like? According to the case files, the first seasonal rainstorm of last year had arrived in the middle of the week. The weather had been hot and humid. Although it rained at night, very few people would have been walking around in heavy clothing. This detail was important. Koite shook his head vigorously. Not regular clothes, sis. I saw it clearly, I swear. He was wearing a rain suit. Completely covered from head to toe. Black as a crow. The kind of thing you'd remember forever after seeing it once. I nodded. That made perfect sense. In the middle of a torrential storm, while disposing of a body and digging a hole, there was no way someone would rely on an umbrella or one of those flimsy disposable raincoats. A black professional rain suit would be the ideal choice for concealing his identity and keeping any syrup from getting on his clothes. But what about his face? Did you get a good look at him? I asked. You don't need to describe whether he was handsome or ugly. Just tell me the basic features. Back when we caught True Vu, I didn't need a sketch artist. I relied solely on the vague descriptions from Black Rat and Grey Rat, and we still tracked the killer down. I'd like to try the same trick again this time. I fired off a barrage of questions. Did he have single eyelids or double eyelids? A high nose bridge or a flat one? Was his mouth wide or did he have an underbite? Koite was bombarded so quickly that his brain practically short-circuited. To a rat, all human faces looked the same: one nose, two eyes, and a mouth that existed solely to scream whenever it saw a rat. Seeing him stare blankly without a word, I sighed inwardly. Sure enough, catching True Vu had been mostly luck and ancestral blessings carrying me on their backs. Rats had no sense of human aesthetics. How could they possibly distinguish subtle facial features? I had no choice but to change my line of questioning. Then take a guess. How old was he? About how tall? Taller than me or shorter than me? Koite blinked. The truth was, he had never witnessed the scene himself. Everything he knew came from stories passed down by his grandfather, retold as a creepy late-night legend used to scare younger rats. By the time the story reached him, it had probably been exaggerated and embellished countless times. After a long pause, he finally answered cautiously. My grandpa said, he was probably around your age, sis. But he was really tall, at least a whole head taller than you. He hesitated before raising a tiny paw toward a young tree standing not far away. No. Actually, about as tall as that tree over there. I followed the direction of his paw and immediately frowned. The tree was still young, but it had to be close to 2 meters tall. This wasn't exactly southern China, and even here, the average height of men wasn't particularly impressive. A man approaching 2 meters in height was rare enough that you could probably count them on one hand. Clearly, this rat was talking nonsense. Big Rat noticed the disbelief on my face as well. He immediately jumped up and smacked Koite across the head. You dare feed my sis a bunch of crap? Trying to fool her? Start telling the truth right now, or I'll confiscate that beef jerky and stick a paw down your throat until you cough every last bite back up. Koite clutched his face and nearly burst into tears. Boss, I'm innocent. I'm telling the truth. I'm just repeating what my grandpa told me. If anyone's exaggerating, blame my grandpa for spinning tall tales. How would I know whether it's true or not? The more Big Rat listened, the angrier he became. He raised a paw threateningly and growled. Still talking back? Big Rat snapped. Your grandpa croaked ages ago. How am I supposed to beat him up? Or do you want to die in his place? Koite trembled from head to tail. I swear. I'm telling the truth. I wouldn't dare lie to you. I quickly raised a hand to stop Big Rat and said sternly. That's enough. If you keep threatening him like this, you'll scare him out of his wits. Even if he knows something, he won't dare say it. Then I softened my tone and coaxed him gently. Koite, how exactly did your grandpa tell you the story? Just repeat it exactly as he told it, word for word. When you're done, I'll give you more cookies and let you go home. Deal? Koite's whiskers twitched excitedly, and his eyes lit up. For sewer rats, there weren't many forms of entertainment besides listening to scary stories. Now that he had a chance to become the storyteller himself, he immediately slipped into the role of his grandfather. It happened on a stormy night. Lightning tore across the pitch-black sky, and the rain fell in drops as big as marbles, pounding against her back like tiny stones. But my grandpa had a family of hungry pups waiting at home, so he gritted his teeth and crawled out to the roadside in search of food. Koite deliberately dragged out the suspenseful parts, sounding exactly like one of those late-night radio hosts who narrated ghost stories. Gray Rat, who was notoriously timid, instinctively shrank back. But his curiosity proved stronger than his fear. "So, what happened next?" he asked, shivering. "What did your grandpa see?" Koite leisurely took another bite of beef jerky, intentionally milking the tension for all it was worth. Only after making everyone wait did he continue. "My grandpa saw, standing beside the road in the pouring rain, a gigantic man, as tall as a tree. He was dressed entirely in black from head to toe. Over his shoulder, he carried a woman. But when Grandpa looked closer, she had no legs. Only her upper body remained." Gray Rat let out a terrified squeak and immediately clung to Black Rat, trembling uncontrollably. I, on the other hand, froze. As expected. Koite's story matched the forensic report perfectly. My heart started pounding. I quickly interrupted. "What happened after that? What did your grandpa see him do next?" Koite had just lifted another piece of jerky toward his mouth when Big Rat kicked it flying. "Quit stalling and talk already," he barked. "De la Ban Dike Tiang On, Jung Nguyen Ten Koite." Koite swallowed hard and stammered. "Why yes." My grandpa was so scared that he lay motionless in the grass, not daring to move a muscle. Then that man took out a shovel and dug a hole right in the flower bed. After that, he shoved the woman's upper body straight into it. At that point, I immediately frowned. Wait a minute. The forensic report clearly states that all of the victim's internal organs were found inside the hole. If he only carried the upper half of the body there, then those organs should have fallen out somewhere along the way. Could your grandpa have seen it wrong? Koite blinked. "I don't know. I'm just telling it the way my grandpa told me. But if anything had fallen out, he probably would have eaten it anyway. No way he'd pass up good food." I nearly threw up. The culinary standards of sewer rats were truly something else. Thank goodness his grandpa never found that pile of spare parts. Otherwise, last year's crime scene might have been destroyed before anyone even realized its importance. Suppressing my nausea, I took a deep breath. Forget that part. Keep going. Koite licked his lips and continued. After planting the victim, the man didn't leave right away. He stood in the rain for a long time, then pulled out his phone and started snapping pictures of the hole. The flash kept going off, just like lightning. I frowned deeply. This killer wasn't just cruel. He was incredibly arrogant. On a stormy night in the deserted outskirts, he wasn't in any hurry to escape. Instead, he stayed behind to admire his own masterpiece. He even had the audacity to turn on the flash and take photographs as souvenirs. Koite shrugged casually. "Well, yeah." After he finished taking pictures, he slowly walked to the back of his car and pulled out the two legs. "Wait." I cut him off, my voice suddenly urgent. "Did you just say a car?" My grandpa saw him take the lower half of the body out of a car. Koite nodded. "Yeah." Then he carried the legs for a short distance and stuck them upside down into that trash bin over there. I sucked in a sharp breath as my mind began racing at full speed. Transporting and disposing of a body would obviously require a vehicle, everyone knew that. But the key question was, where had that vehicle been parked during the entire process? A year ago, this area had still been an abandoned development site, not yet fully planned or built. Security cameras were sparse, sometimes several kilometers apart. The task force had spent months reviewing footage from every road leading to the flower bed that night, but the result was the same: not a single vehicle had stopped or behaved suspiciously. Every car appeared to pass through normally and leave the area. That was the biggest blind spot that had pushed the case into a dead end. What trick had the killer used to evade the entire surveillance system? He had transported the body to the outskirts, calmly dug a hole, disposed of the remains, taken photographs, and vanished without leaving a trace. Seeing me deep in thought, Koite looked surprised. "Wait, there are so many humans around, and you still don't know where the car was parked?" "That's easy." He raised a tiny paw and pointed toward the massive construction site bustling behind us. His car was parked way over there. Not far from the flower bed at all. I stared in the direction he indicated. The construction site was enormous. Reinforced concrete skeletons of 20- and 30-story buildings now towered over the landscape. These days, any unfamiliar vehicle entering the site would have to pass through a heavily guarded security checkpoint. But what about a year ago? A year ago, it had been nothing more than an empty lot surrounded by temporary metal fencing. If the killer had deliberately switched off his headlights, taken a detour, and used the vacant land to approach the flower bed from behind instead of driving along the paved road covered by surveillance cameras, then the police could have searched until they went blind and still never found the vehicle's trail. This was a breakthrough clue. My eyes lit up instantly. I grabbed Koite and fired off a series of questions. Which direction did the car come from? And when it left, which way did it go? Do you know? I had to admit it, Koite's grandfather had truly been the biggest gossip in the entire underground route world. Koite puffed out his chest proudly. My grandpa was really patient. He hid there and watched from start to finish. When the man in black carried the two legs from the flower bed to the trash can, Grandpa secretly followed him. Then he saw the guy return to his car, start the engine, and drive away toward the southeast. As for which direction he came from, Koite shrugged. Grandpa had no idea. He was busy looking for food at the time. Perfect. Even if we didn't know where he had started from, knowing his escape route was enough to significantly narrow down the camera search. I quickly asked another question. Did your grandfather happen to remember what time the man left? Koite shook his head. No idea. We don't exactly wear watches. But Grandpa said that after the guy drove away, he was about to crawl out and nibble on some leftovers when someone suddenly came running over. Then that person started screaming and making a bunch of phone calls. Not long after, a whole swarm of people in blue and yellow uniforms showed up, as many as ants. Grandpa had no choice but to abandon the food and run for his life, scurrying back to his nest. Piecing the details together, I could easily deduce that the first person to arrive and call the police was the sanitation worker. As soon as the police received the report, they immediately secured the scene. That meant the killer had escaped only moments before law enforcement arrived. All we had to do was cross-reference the timeline, determine exactly when the sanitation worker made the emergency call, and then review all traffic camera footage along the southeast route. Identifying the suspicious vehicle would become only a matter of time. I was so excited I wanted to shout. Quickly pulling several packs of cookies from my pocket, I tore them open and poured them out in front of Koite. Excellent. Your testimony is extremely valuable. This is your payment. Help yourself. Koite looked at the pile of cookies, chuckled awkwardly, and scratched his ear. Well. Chee-ha, you said these cookies were delicious, and those gray rats said the same thing. But honestly, after tasting that piece of beef jerky you gave me earlier, I think it was way better. These cookies are kind of dry. I'm not really into them. Could I, maybe exchange my payment for meat instead? I froze for 5 full seconds. That was my mistake. I'd automatically assumed all rats were as easy to please and sweet-toothed as the gray rat and black rat back home. Even Lang 107 the cockroach was obsessed with sugary snacks. As for the foul-mouthed big rat, whenever a craving hit, he'd happily demolish an entire butter cheesecake by himself. That's why I'd confidently brought nothing but cookies as bribery material. I'd completely forgotten that wild sewer rats were omnivores that survived on garbage and rotten meat. Their instincts craved animal protein. Looking around, the entire area was nothing but weeds and concrete. There wasn't a convenience store in sight, and even food delivery services were practically out of range. I could only coax him. Just wait here for a bit, okay? I'll head to the main road, catch a ride, and buy some meat for you. Seeing that Koite was starting to push his luck, Chip-Bu got annoyed and rushed over to smack him with a paw. Quit acting spoiled. You're lucky enough to get cookies, and now you're demanding meat? Do you think my chi is your personal servant? Back when you lived in this dump, you couldn't even dream of eating fancy cookies like these. Koite clutched his head and pouted. That's not fair. I practically risked my life. I almost got my head chewed off by a stray cat and got jumped by other rats. I worked my tail off to bring back important information. And now I can't even get a piece of meat? Fine then. I'm upset. I don't want anything anymore. Watching Koite put on such an over-the-top pitiful act, I didn't know whether to laugh or get annoyed. He was obviously trying to blackmail me emotionally. But for the greater good, I decided to give in. Alright. A promise is a promise. I never cheat my witnesses out of their reward. Go hide in those bushes for now. I'll buy the meat and come back for you right away. After saying that, I opened the container and herded the 3 rats and laying 107 back inside my pocket. Before zipping it up, I shot the rats a warning glare. Remember what I told you. Stop chewing on my pencils and drawing board. If I get angry, I'm cutting your food rations. Should XAM blinked innocently and immediately denied everything. I didn't chew on them, Chi. My teeth are too weak. Chit Dan also shook his head vigorously in agreement. That's right. We're good rats. We won't chew on random things anymore. Only Chip-Bu remained expressionless and silent, not bothering to respond. Meanwhile, Lang 107 put on an obedient look and shamelessly sucked up to me. Chi-ha, those pencils don't look very expensive. Could you buy a few extra for us to chew on for entertainment? I was speechless. I shot all of them a long stare, trying to judge their attitudes. If I ever had spare time, maybe I'd actually buy them a few pencils to gnaw on instead of food. Turning around, I saw that although Koite had been complaining about how dry and tasteless the cookies were, his paws were still moving at lightning speed, gathering every last crumb and stashing them deep inside the bushes for later. Typical rat behavior. Even with an upgrade, he couldn't get rid of his food-hoarding instincts. Once everything was settled, I dusted off my clothes and leisurely walked back toward the car. Lam Fong was reclining in the driver's seat with his feet propped up, completely absorbed in a case file. Seeing me return much earlier than expected, he naturally assumed I had found nothing useful at this abandoned crime scene. He tossed the file aside and stretched with a yawn. All done, Miss Consultant? Hop in. I'll take you back to headquarters. The case is already a year old. Not finding any clues is perfectly normal, so don't be too discouraged. I opened the car door, slid into the passenger seat, and raised an eyebrow at him. Who told you I didn't find any clues? Lam Fong froze. His eyes widened with disbelief. You've got to be kidding. Don't tell me you actually sensed some murderous aura and already know who the killer is? I burst out laughing. You make it sound like I'm some kind of immortal. I don't have supernatural psychic powers like that. I just managed to uncover a few key clues. Lam Fong still looked skeptical, but clues were better than no clues. He immediately leaned forward. What did you find? Let's hear it. I fastened my seatbelt and replied calmly. It's a long story. First, drive me to a busy commercial area. I need to buy something. After that, we'll come back here, and then I'll give Deputy Director Pham a full report. Lam Fong frowned in annoyance. Inside, he was grumbling to himself. What is this girl up to now? If she found clues, why not just say so? Instead, she's making me drive all over town so she can go shopping. Unbelievable. But he didn't dare argue. The last thing he wanted was to offend the Lucky Charm personally recruited by his boss. So he reluctantly started the engine and drove me into town, where I bought a large piece of pre-cooked pork. To his surprise, after the purchase, I insisted on returning to the crime scene instead of heading back to headquarters. That was the final straw. Lam Fong's patience had officially run out. He couldn't hold it in any longer. Mok, do you have any idea how serious this case is? May is almost here. The Grim Reaper's scythe is hanging over the heads of innocent women out there. We don't have much time left. His voice grew sharper. Could you please stop wasting time on these ridiculous errands? I owed Lam Fong an apology. Deep down, I knew that making him wait, then drive all the way into town to buy meat, and then come all the way back to this deserted wasteland was a waste of the task force's precious time. But what I was doing was just as critical. Without payment, my entire sewer intelligence network would go on strike immediately. Seeing how determined I was, Lam Fong grew even more irritated. He was furious that I kept acting on my own without offering a single explanation. But looking at my serious expression, with no sign that I was joking, and clinging to the faint hope that I might truly have uncovered clues about the killer, he swallowed his frustration and let out a long sigh. Fine. But please hurry up. We need to get back to headquarters as soon as possible, Lam Fong grumbled. It won't take long, I replied curtly. I'm just going to pay my witness. I opened the car door and stepped out. Lam Fong immediately started to get out as well. He was dying of curiosity to find out why I had bought that huge plastic bag and exactly what kind of miraculous witness I was meeting in the middle of nowhere. But I was faster. I blocked the door before he could follow. Just wait in the car for a few minutes. No need to come with me. Seeing how secretive I was acting, Lam Fong wanted to insist on following. But after recalling Deputy Director Pham's instructions, he reluctantly backed down. Fine. Go then. Just make it quick. I slammed the door shut and walked toward the bushes where Koite was hiding. To avoid letting Lam Fong discover my bizarre little transaction, I had deliberately told him to park some distance away. But I had underestimated him. The moment I disappeared behind the roadside divider, the young detective immediately reached into the trunk and pulled out a pair of military-grade binoculars used for surveillance work. He raised them to his eyes and carefully monitored my every movement. She's squatting beside the flower bed. What is she taking out of that bag? Wait a second, the bag is moving. Is there something alive in there? Lam Fong muttered to himself, his eyes glued to the binoculars. At that moment, he clearly saw me pulling out a package of pre-sliced boiled pork from the plastic bag. It made absolutely no sense. The woman had supposedly uncovered a major clue in a serial murder case. Instead of rushing back to headquarters to report it, she had made him drive all over town to buy pork, then returned to the crime scene and squatted beside a flower bed. To eat? What the hell is going on here? Lam Fong lowered the binoculars in disbelief and rubbed his eyes. The utterly illogical scene made Lam Fong question his entire understanding of reality. He raised the binoculars and looked again. No. He hadn't seen it wrong. That chunk of boiled pork wasn't for me. I was throwing it onto the ground for a swarm of sewer rats. Not one rat. An entire crowd of them. Meanwhile, I was breaking out in a cold sweat. Earlier at the supermarket, I had gritted my teeth and bought a generous portion of boiled pork, even asking the clerk to slice it up for convenience. My plan had been simple: toss it into the bushes for Koite and leave as quickly as possible. But the moment I opened the bag, rustle, rustle, rustle. Instead of one familiar rat face emerging from the bushes, 7 or 8 pointed rat snouts popped out at once. Every pair of eyes gleamed like car headlights, staring fixedly at the package of meat in my hand. Hey, Koite, you weren't lying to us. This human really brought meat for you, one fat rat squealed. Oh my god, it smells amazing, fatty boiled pork, another one gulped loudly. Hey, human, can you really understand what we're saying? A timid rat asked curiously, poking its nose forward. Koite pushed his way through the crowd in panic, shoving rats aside as he yelled. Move. Move. It's all mine. I only called you guys over as backup. Who said you could come freeloading? He squeezed his way to the front line and looked up at me with a sly rat grin. His tiny paws rubbed together eagerly. Chee-haw, give me the meat already. I've been waiting so long that my youth has practically passed me by. I sighed and tossed the entire package deep into the bushes. Here. Boiled pork. This one has plenty of fat on it, fragrant and chewy. Exactly the kind that sticks between your teeth. Koite practically exploded with joy. Amazing. Chiha really is a good person. Tang XAM wasn't lying. I smiled faintly and took the opportunity to secure a long-term agreement. Remember my face. If I ever need your help again, I'll make sure to bring exactly the premium grade meat you all like. While Koite was busy gnawing on a chunk of pork, he looked up at my words and slapped his chest confidently. Deal. Chee-haw, with meat, everything is possible. As long as you keep us fed, we'll take any job. The moment he finished speaking, he turned around and snarled at the group of rats fighting over the bag of meat. Hey, hey! Stop tearing it apart. Don't bite through the bag. Take it back to the nest and divide it properly. Why are you acting like you've been starving for years? You're making me look bad. Watching the huge, filthy sewer rats frantically tearing into the pork, I couldn't help but feel a chill crawl up my spine. Even though I'd worked with these creatures many times before, the sight still made my skin crawl. I stood up and dusted off my pants. Alright, you guys stay busy. I'm heading out. With a giant chunk of meat stuffed in his mouth, Koite mumbled incoherently. Come back again next time. Gee. The moment I turned and walked away, Lam Fong, who had been secretly observing from the car, hurriedly lowered his binoculars. He straightened himself in the driver's seat, but his chest was still rising and falling from shock. Just what kind of person was this Hamok? In broad daylight, she had gone out and bought an entire bag of premium pork just to feed sewer rats. People who loved animals usually fed stray cats and dogs. This woman, however, was pampering filthy disease-carrying rodents. She's insane. I opened the passenger door and climbed into the car. The sound of the door opening was completely ordinary, but Lam Fong was so psychologically disturbed by what he'd just witnessed that he nearly jumped out of his skin. Ah! He jolted backward and almost smashed his head against the roof. I stared at him in confusion. What's wrong with you? Did you see a ghost? Lam Fong's face turned pale. His eyes remained glued to the canvas backpack I was hugging tightly against my chest. Through the binoculars earlier, he had clearly seen something moving inside it. Don't tell me she's actually keeping sewer rats as pets. He swallowed hard and forced out a smile that looked more painful than crying. And no. Nothing. I was just overthinking things and startled myself. I shrugged. I couldn't be bothered exposing his ridiculous excuse. He was probably just startled because I'd opened the door too suddenly. I pulled the seatbelt across my chest and fastened it. Everything's done. Let's head back to the bureau and make our report. On the drive back, Lam Fong kept trying to reassure himself. Everyone had their own weird hobbies. Fine. Whatever. The important thing was whether she had actually found any useful clues. Afraid he might start complaining again, I decided to get straight to the point. That night, the killer parked his vehicle right here. Dui de la Ban Dike Tiang On, Jung Nguyen Ten Nuoi Viet. I pulled out my hand-drawn map and circled a location with my pencil. Although the sketch looked rough and messy, it was remarkably accurate. I pointed to the area that was now a bustling construction site, the exact place Koite had indicated earlier. After disposing of the body, the killer stayed behind to take photographs before casually returning to his vehicle and starting the engine. The time he drove away almost perfectly matches the moment the sanitation worker discovered the scene and called the police. I drew a straight line across the map. The vehicle escaped along this route. Sweat began forming on Lam Fong's forehead. What exactly was he witnessing? That self-proclaimed psychic consultant had scribbled a few circles on a piece of paper, climbed back into the car, and was now speaking as calmly as if everything she said were an established fact. Yet the moment she unfolded the sketch, he fell completely silent. Could she really have seen what happened a year ago? Did she somehow know where the killer had parked and what time he had fled? Forcing a stiff smile, Lam Fong cautiously probed for more information. I answered casually. I'm not sure about the model, but it was a black vehicle. Hearing that, Lam Fong secretly rolled his eyes. For a moment, he had thought she possessed some extraordinary insight. Turns out she could only make a vague guess about the color of the car. His skepticism felt completely justified. I know you don't believe me, I said calmly, tapping the sketch with my finger. But this is my intuition. Go check the surveillance footage when we get back, and you'll see. Lam Fong nodded absent-mindedly. Deep down, he thought this bizarre, supernatural-sounding clue would have to be reported to Pham Hui before anyone could decide whether it was worth investigating. After all, he was just a junior detective. He didn't have the authority to mobilize personnel and review surveillance footage simply because some mysterious consultant made a few bold claims. Back at headquarters, Pham Hui listened to my report and fell into deep thought. Scratching his head in frustration, he said, We already reviewed every camera in that area countless times. There weren't any suspicious vehicles or unusual activities at all. Even so, a part of him still wanted to gamble on my luck. I spread the sketch across the table and pointed at the large red circle. What if the killer deliberately took a detour? What if he used the empty lot near that construction site to avoid the cameras on the main road, then approached the flower bed from behind? Pham Hui immediately turned toward Lam Fong, who had been one of the key members of the surveillance review team back then. Frowning slightly, Lam Fong began explaining. Ban Dike Tiang On, Jung Nguyen Ten Nuoi Viet. We did check that area, Lam Fong explained. But at the time, we focused mainly on surveillance cameras along the roads that led directly to the crime scene. We reviewed footage until our eyes nearly gave out and still found nothing suspicious, so the task force shifted its attention to investigating the victim's social connections. Who would have thought the killer would pull something so unconventional and avoid paved roads altogether by sneaking through dirt tracks? That vacant lot was full of large rocks and overgrown weeds. One wrong move and a car could easily scrape its undercarriage. On top of that, there was a torrential storm that night. The dirt roads were muddy as hell. Driving through there would have been incredibly difficult. He continued. We also reviewed traffic cameras on nearby roads within a radius of more than 10 kilometers. Do we still have those recordings archived? Pham Hui asked immediately. We do. Street surveillance systems usually overwrite data after 30 days, but this was a major case. The footage from a year ago should still be stored in the Bureau's archives. Lam Fong nodded confidently. Pham Hui's expression turned serious at once. Check it again. Immediately. Focus on the time frame and direction that Koha identified. Search every piece of archived footage and find that suspicious black vehicle. Yes, sir. Lam Fong stood at attention and accepted the order. With a new lead to pursue, the previously exhausted criminal investigation unit suddenly came alive, as if injected with adrenaline. Yet deep inside, everyone still harbored the same enormous question. Could this consultant's prediction really be accurate? Would the killer truly go so far as to avoid surveillance cameras, drive across a muddy wasteland to dispose of a body, and then linger around the scene until someone discovered it and called the police before finally leaving? More than 2 hours later. Chief. We found it. A shout tore through the tense silence in the office. Every head turned toward the computer screen in front of a young officer. A black sedan. License plate, back S8P8. At 3:14 a.m., it turned off Vong Sun Road and disappeared into a surveillance blind spot. Then at 5:23 a.m., almost immediately after the sanitation workers' report had reached the police, the same vehicle emerged from the direction of Vong Sun Road and fled the area. Pham Hui was the first to rush over. He stopped behind the young officer, eyes wide as he stared at the screen in disbelief. Ban Dike Tiang On, Jung Nguyen Ten Nuoi Viet. We found it. We actually found it. The mysterious vehicle had appeared and disappeared with perfect timing, matching the reported timeline of the case down to the minute. The person whom Pham Hui had stubbornly brought over from Shuyanhai despite all the pressure had truly uncovered a fatal clue, delivering a resounding slap to everyone who had mocked and belittled her. For once, Pham Hui had every reason to be proud. I knew I had a good eye for talent, he thought smugly. The young officer, seeing his boss so excited that he looked ready to jump out of his shoes, quickly stepped aside to make room. The cursor on the monitor pointed directly at the image of the black vehicle. Vong Sun Road is more than 10 kilometers from the flower bed where the body was discovered, Pham Hui muttered, his face flushed with excitement. The camera review team back then didn't have enough manpower to search that far out. No wonder we missed this vehicle. Behind him, more than a dozen officers crowded around the monitor, pushing and squeezing for a better look. The black car vanished into a surveillance blind spot and, coincidentally, or perhaps not, reappeared almost immediately after the crime had been reported. The entire criminal investigation unit was stunned. Dozens of eyes turned toward me, who was standing calmly not far away. That clue, which had sounded absurd and reeked of superstition, had turned out to be frighteningly accurate. Could it be that the title of special consultant given to her by the Shuyanhai branch wasn't just an empty label after all? Pham Hui couldn't stop grinning. He slammed his hand on the desk with a loud smack and shouted. What are you all standing around for? Check the owner's information on that vehicle right now. Move. When he noticed several officers still staring at me in shock, he barked. Spread out and get back to work. Have you all got nothing better to do? You've been chasing this case for years and accomplished nothing. Now a young woman who's been here for barely a day has already uncovered a breakthrough, and none of you feel embarrassed? Get moving. Despite being scolded mercilessly, none of the officers felt offended. After all, while their boss was yelling, the corners of his eyes were crinkled with delight. Most importantly, they finally had a breakthrough. Every member of the team immediately rolled up their sleeves and got to work, pulling registration records, verifying identities, and preparing emergency search warrant applications. The atmosphere in the office was electric. Everyone believed that the rainy night killer's downfall was finally within reach. Pham Hui walked over to me, rubbing his hands together excitedly. Chi-ha, we truly owe you this time. If you hadn't stepped in, we could have spent another 10 years searching and still never found this clue. Unlike Pham Hui, who had been haunted by this case for 6 long years, I remained surprisingly calm. Doi Fo Pham, let's not celebrate too early. We can celebrate after we've actually caught the killer. Pham Hui nodded repeatedly. Right. Right. We need to catch him first. The information on the owner of the black vehicle was quickly retrieved. The moment the profile appeared on the screen, everyone in the room drew a sharp breath. The vehicle belonged to Donbai Jia, the CEO of a technology company. The company itself was fairly ordinary. Its registered capital wasn't particularly impressive, and its future prospects were uncertain. What truly caught everyone's attention was his father's background. Donbai Jia's father was a powerful businessman with enormous influence throughout Van Nam province. Investigating someone from such an elite and well-connected family was no simple matter. One careless move could spell disaster for the entire team. Every step of the investigation would have to be conducted with extreme caution and complete secrecy. Without wasting a second, Pham Hui gathered the documents and rushed straight into Du Cam Kai's office. The two senior officers shut the door and held a confidential meeting that lasted quite a while. I waited and waited, but nothing seemed to be happening. Meanwhile, my stomach was growling. In the end, I asked for permission to head back to the hotel first. After returning to my room, I remembered that I had told the front desk not to send housekeeping that morning. I locked the door and finally released the unluckiest squad ever, my cockroach team, so they could get some fresh air. After being trapped inside a plastic bottle for so long, they might have developed collective depression if I kept them locked up any longer. After eating, showering, and taking care of everything else, I climbed into bed and enjoyed a wonderfully peaceful sleep. The next morning, I woke up, brushed my teeth, washed my face, and finished breakfast. Yet my phone remained completely silent. Just as I was about to grab my backpack and head to the bureau on my own, Pham Hui finally called. "Chi-ha, we're about to pay a visit to the owner of the vehicle, Don Vai Jia. Do you have time to come with us?" Of course, I answered immediately. "Just stay at the bureau. I'll be there right away." "Good," Pham Hui replied. "I'll send someone to meet you in the lobby." The person who came to pick me up was Lam Fong. But what surprised me most was what I saw when I reached the vehicle. The person sitting comfortably in the front passenger seat wasn't Pham Hui. It was Du Kam Kai. Startled, I quickly bowed my head in greeting. "Hello, Captain Du." Du Kam Kai gave a slight nod in return, his tone calm and indifferent. "Did you rest well last night?" Being shown concern by the team's top leader caught me off guard. I nodded repeatedly. "Yes, very well." "And what about you, Captain Du?" "The same as always." Lam Fong steered the vehicle out through the gates of the police bureau. Clearing his throat, he started a conversation. "I was too excited last night to sleep. Stayed up the whole night digging through 3 generations of Don Vai Jia's family background." "Well? Did you find any dirt on him?" I asked curiously. Lam Fong's face fell. "Nothing. No criminal record, no history of street racing, no fights. His profile is spotless. Looks perfect on paper." I understood exactly what he meant. People from wealthy families always had immaculate public images. Digging up their secrets was never easy. Sitting in the front passenger seat, Du Kam Kai spoke coldly. "When we get there, watch what you say. One careless remark could bring trouble upon yourself." Lam Fong let out a quiet snort. "Don't worry, Captain. I know my place. How could low-ranking cops like us dare offend rich people with powerful connections?" Du Kam Kai didn't respond. Instead, he silently glanced at me through the rearview mirror. I had always been highly sensitive to other people's emotions, so I immediately understood his meaning. From a police officer's perspective, this case was far more complicated than it appeared. The corner of Du Kam Kai's mouth lifted slightly into a rare smile before his usual cold expression returned. "When we get there, stay close to me." He paused before adding. "And remember, talk less, observe more." Both Lam Fong and I nodded at the same time. Our destination was a massive luxury villa located inside an exclusive gated community reserved for the ultra-wealthy, the residents of Don Vai Jia. As soon as the vehicle stopped, a middle-aged man who introduced himself as the estate manager came out to greet us personally. He escorted us inside and politely invited us to sit on an expensive sofa in the living room. "Please wait a moment. Young Master Don will be downstairs shortly," the manager said respectfully. I had to admit, the service here was impeccable. Fragrant tea and premium pastries were served with great care. The only problem was that the waiting time felt endless. Lam Fong took a sip of tea and couldn't resist making a sarcastic remark. "Is young Master Don filming a historical drama or something? Why is he taking so long? It's already broad daylight." Sitting beside him, I nearly burst out laughing. This young officer, Lam Fong, was the kind of person who wore his heart on his sleeve. Judging from yesterday's trip to the crime scene, he must have exercised tremendous self-control not to lose his temper. Du Kim Kai shot him a warning glare powerful enough to melt steel. Realizing he'd spoken out of turn, Lam Fong quickly lifted his teacup and gulped down a mouthful, silently cursing himself. This mouth of mine is going to get me killed one day. The estate manager had said that Don Vai Jia would be down right away. Yet when I checked the time, we had already been meditating in that living room for nearly 30 minutes. Only then did Don Vai Jia finally stroll down the staircase. Who was Du Kam Kai? The captain of the city's criminal investigation unit. And yet this young master actually had the audacity to keep him waiting for half an hour. Typical rich kid behavior, arrogance and condescension practically built into his bones. You're from the city bureau? Don Vai Jia asked casually. The heir of the Don family was quite young, probably around 27 or 28. He was handsome, well-dressed, and carried himself with confidence. Unfortunately, the way he looked at people as though they were beneath him, with his nose perpetually pointed toward the sky, made him instantly irritating. Please stay tuned for the next part. Like and follow my channel to get story updates faster. Thank you all very much.